Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Geeks from the Multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Matt, and we have a really exciting episode for you because we're going to be talking about the Loki TV series. And a little warning, there might be some spoilers for season 2. So if you haven't finished it, I don't know what you're waiting for, but shut this off, go watch it, and come back. But we're going to be talking about what characters are in there, our favorite things about each of the seasons. So let's get geeky.
Hey everybody, this is your boy John, and as always with me is Matt.
What's up, everybody?
So again, with the Geeks from the Multiverse podcast, we always love to give you guys the best content as always, but we want to appreciate and the fact that you guys support us, okay, in the way of following, subscribing, and even just showing some love by even getting some emails and some other stuff like that. And again, we love that stuff. But anyways, we want to actually point out that if you do go on Spotify, okay, so the 60% of people that actually do listen to us on Spotify, you can actually look at us. We actually have our playlist. Okay, so there's different songs that like very geek culture like. You can look at that. I mean, honestly, I've listened to it a few times. I've even listened to it at work.
If you're a geek, you definitely need to listen to this playlist. Like, it's seriously that good. Like,
it's geeky enough where you can literally find something and you'll be like, wow, I did not realize that was even on Spotify. But anyways,
the Pokemon theme and disco.
That's a different time. But I mean, yes. So if you want
the kind of things that you'll find on our playlist, but it's awesome.
Random. But anyways, no, I was just gonna say if you look at our link tree or if you go on more like this on our Spotify page, you'll actually see that podcast on there. Or again, you go on Linktree and you'll be able to find that too. But let's kind of get this going, Matt, because I know
I mean, I do have a little side note because the Marvels came out. It's still out right now, obviously, but their opening weekend box office, John, was, and I think I said this in a previous episode where I said I think it's going to make less than The Flash.
I think The Flash and the Marvels. Okay, if we're gonna come, I'm just gonna say because I know both you and I agreed that we're not gonna go to the actual movies and pay money to go watch this. We're gonna wait until Disney Plus happens and then we kind of decide on that. But like, why do you think that it would make less? Because I feel like maybe in some ways they're like they should have been at the same level of like maybe.
We kind of touched on this in the one of the episodes that we just did, and it's sort of like I have to think it's the characters. Like, there's not enough investment in the characters, and there's not as much interest. Like when you're talking Monica Rambeau and Kamala Khan, there's not that much interest.
I look at it though as like each character, like maybe the well-known characters. Like, so if you look at the Flash, I mean, clearly a lot of people are going to know that, right? Versus like Carol Danvers being Miss Marvel, and then Monica Rambeau being Photon, and then Miss Marvel as Kamala Khan and all this other stuff. But like, I don't know. I think it's in some ways like when you look at how maybe the stories are driven and how they do it. I mean, the only reason why I think, The Flash did a little bit better was because of Michael Keaton.
So let me get to the numbers.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, the Flash's opening weekend box office was $55 million, which was way, I don't know the total cost of what their CGI costs, but I can guarantee you it was more than $100 million.
Easily,
because 98.9% of that movie is CGI. The Marvel's weekend opening box office was $47 million. And knowing how much Disney pays
In CGI, probably it's like
CGI, all the costs. I'm sure that it's upward of probably 2 to 300 million.
right because they have the money to do so.
Now, will the movie eventually reach an appropriate number over time? If it stays in the theaters long enough, it might reach a pretty significant amount. But is it going to be like Avengers big? No. I think they'll be lucky if they probably cross 300 million. Maybe
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
it's
it's
hard
kinda
to
one of
tell,
those
but
things.
it's definitely it's the lowest weekend box office for the MCU thus far in all the movies that came out.
I mean, I'd be curious to see what is the lowest like grossing like box office weekend like ever made. You know what I mean? Like
Like
especially
all
like
time, yeah, yeah.
because like when you look at those kinds of movies, I mean, like the ones that you would think that would do really well. I understand like Disney. We've already talked about how
This
Disney.
one was projected to be to be low. So I mean, even experts were projecting it to be low, but I don't know if they were quite expecting it to be less than DC's worst movie.
No, what I mean is like it's tough because we've already talked about how Marvel is going down this more feminine, lead roles in this sense, and we're trying to see more of, them being a part of like the bigger picture, but like, you know, is it going to be now the new norm for Marvel? Like, are they expecting to just be like, what, we're just going to make these movies and then, hopefully they'll do well, or
Yeah, I mean, I
they're
think
hoping, I don't know.
with Marvel's doing as poorly as it is, I think, like I said, I think it has to do with character development. I think the characters are not fully developed. And why do I think they're not developed? Look at how many projects Marvel's pushing out.
Yeah.
We said it before, like Ant-Man was pushed up. It wasn't supposed to come out when it was supposed to come out. It was supposed to come out months later, but they changed the timeline on it. And when it came out in theaters, the CGI wasn't even done.
Right.
So half of the CGI in the movie is blurry because they didn't have an opportunity to fully spend the time that they thought they were going to.
Well, not only that, I mean,
There's too
now,
many projects, dude. Like,
well, there's too many projects,
yeah.
and the problem is that you also have now actors who are also under investigations for different things. So again, unfortunately, like King the Conqueror was the guy who played him and everything else. Like he was under investigation for certain
He
things.
still is. He
Still is, yes.
he has a trial sometime this month.
But that's my point. It's
Yeah.
like, now you have to look at recasting and doing all this other stuff and like trying to maybe get other people in and doing whatever. I mean, I know you might mention a certain individual who may, prize their role of was it Mr. Fantastic that you and I talked about a little earlier?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so go
And
ahead,
right, I
man.
mean, right now he's in talks, but I don't. I mean, I like Pedro Pascal as an actor. I think
I agree
think
with you,
He's a
yes.
great actor, but I also question, like, does he need to be in everything that geeks could do?
So that's the thing. I mean, like literally, look, we understand the whole Mando. That's great. He was also in Last of Us. Great. I thought he was great in that role. He does not need to be Mr. Fantastic. It doesn't seem like the right fit.
And right now he's supposedly he's in final talks. So
I mean, I've already said this to you. I mean, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt.
it'll never happen.
I know, and it just drives me goddamn insane. Like you had the perfect couple, and then you could have easily brought in two other people, and it would have been fine. But no, that's how Marvel wants to play it. They're like, you're gonna get John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, but only for a minute, and then basically he'll die. But that's fine.
Yeah, you got turned into spaghetti. You didn't know?
Yeah, basically that's how that works, and that was it. And so it's
Yeah.
like, what the hell? But anyways,
I mean, that's kind of the direction Marvel's going in. But I mean, one of the highlights of Marvel right now is obviously Loki. He's that character. I think arguably you can debate be all you want on this, but I think Loki right now is probably the most popular Marvel character that's in current projects.
right? Because I mean, he was in Avengers. Right. He's one of the only very few characters still left.
Yeah.
That is still around and still doing stuff. Now, we're not going to go into this right now, but there are some things that you unfortunately might be sad about, once we get to that point. But like, the show as a whole, though, you know, and we'll talk about it more and more, but like, it's one of the first times you actually get to see Loki for who he really is as an
Yeah,
individual.
I mean, you really get to go down a journey with Loki as a character, yes, he's a god, but he's, kind of that human being aspect of who Loki is. And I think that that's what's different from a TV show, from a movie, is like you can invest in that time to really develop that character. And season 1 and season 2 definitely did that.
Right, and the other big thing about Loki is like, when we see him in the movies, like I mean, I'm not gonna lie, he was an asshole. Like he really was in the
Yeah.
beginning, like in Avengers and in a few other things. But like, he kind of like right in this show, like when it started, it was like he was the victim. Like he didn't know what was going on. He decided, well, actually, he didn't decide anything. He just was pulled, and then he got thrown into basically time jail, and so on and so forth. But like, then you get to see him turn into, basically a hero.
Yeah.
And when you watch the show, but like, at the time, you're like, man, this guy. I'm like, I'm glad he's thrown in jail. But then afterwards, you're like, maybe I need to watch this a little bit more to kind of understand
Yeah,
what's
so
really
the
going
one
on.
thing, yes, like Avengers happened, the very first movie. But and the Loki in this TV series, he is, I think his official name is Variant L1130. That's his actual like code or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but this Loki is actually a variant from Avengers, which in the beginning of the TV show, they are, all the Avengers in Endgame are doing their like time heist to get all the stones. And we see this Loki from Avengers, captured after, the Hulk did the smashing, which was pretty epic in that movie.
Oh yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
but after, when that scene ends in Endgame, they actually bring him down into an elevator and they bring him downstairs. And that's kind of where the Avengers kind of screw things up. And the Tesseract kind of ends up right next to his feet.
And then he like disappears with it, and then he like gets transported over to the TVA, which that's where it originally starts. So like in the end of like that one scene in Endgame, it brings you into that moment, which was nice because now you get to see where he was going and what was going on in that moment.
Yeah. So the thing with that whole situation was Loki created essentially a new timeline, and because of this new timeline, like that version of Loki never actually went through what the events were in Thor: Dark World and Thor: Ragnarok.
Because I would hope by now, if you've never seen Thor and everything else, I don't care at this point when it comes to spoilers, but like technically in Endgame, he technically dies. What we think, right? We see him die in like in the very beginning because Thanos is like basically strangling him to death, and he like
Right.
turns purple. But like we think he's dead, but then of course we find out that that's not really the case. But like in that moment, it's sad. It's like, okay, we've seen Loki for so long. He's done so many things, but like, you know, when you're seeing him again in this, in the end of like Endgame, and like that very last scene, and then it's like I said, he's like creating a new timeline and basically a new variant of himself. Now you get to see a previous Loki that has no idea of really what was going on, even though, like we said, Loki was originally
Right.
dead.
Because he disappeared from the very first Avengers movie.
Right, and so like none of the events that we've already seen before
Right.
ever like.
He did not experience anything all the way up to Endgame. None of that was anything that, he skipped all of that.
Right, and then he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna do something else. See ya."
So the last thing that, kind of that Loki remembers is, taking over New York and trying to bring, Thanos's troops to Earth.
Right, and basically in that sense, if they were successful, then Thanos would have came down and done that. But well, here we are.
So, obviously Thor: Dark World and Ragnarok changed him as a character into being who who we've seen him as. So this Loki obviously is a variant who doesn't quite know like what's going on or what the TVA is or kind of what his purpose is. Um, the next person we have is Sylvie, who is a female a variant of Loki, and she has a very different background than the rest of I think the Lokis do. Um, and the reason she calls herself Sylvie is because she did not want to think of herself as being a Loki variant.
And it's unique that she thinks that way. It's probably because, like, you look at the other Lokis, they have that kind of same mentality, but like, of course, in different personas and things like that. But like, for her, it was like her life was already like when you watch the show, it's like her life was already being taken away, from the TVA.
Yeah.
And you start to learn like why Sylvie is thinking this way, but like, in the beginning, you're just like, okay, well, that's interesting how there's a female Loki who now doesn't want to have anything to do with basically being Loki. But, she, when she literally tries to take over the TVA, right? Like in the very first season. I mean, you look at Loki, like our Loki, the one we know, like, and they're both helping each other out. And they're, again, you see He Who Remains, which at first we didn't know if it was going to be King the Conqueror, right? Because in the comics, it kind of somewhat talked about it, but not really. So you don't really know like who the character is technically. But if comics and you kind of think outside the box here, you're like, no, that's King the Conqueror. They're just not going to say it at first, but they're going to maybe talk about it later on. But like for her sake, she's like, whoever made the TVA, I want to kill because you've just screwed up my own timeline and you've already screwed up so many people's lives.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she definitely like wants to destroy the TVA, wants to destroy He Who Remains, and she kind of views herself as an agent of the universe, like itself. So the one thing about Sylvie and her character is there is another character that plays a pretty big role when it comes to Secret Wars.
Which I know what you're going with this. It's like the Enchantress.
Yep.
But like
Different from the Enchantress from the DC movie that we've recently seen.
well, yes, that too. But like technically, yeah, I see where you're going with it because I could see that because I know in the comics it was somebody different. Like it was like somebody like part of like the
Yeah, I mean,
like Thor's friends or something like that. But like really,
it was
Loki's
somebody
friend,
different,
yeah.
but like I can see her doing that role more than I can seeing her play Loki. Only in the fact that like she doesn't want to even view herself as being a Loki variant. And the Enchantress has very similar abilities as she does currently.
Well, I mean, you look at season 2 of where she's at, right? You see her at a McDonald's in 1982, I think it was what it was, and then she's just basically a cashier. Like to me, like she's not even wanting to be like Loki at all or have anything.
Yeah,
to
she
do
doesn't
with,
want
like,
to. Yeah, she doesn't want to do any of that. And obviously, from what we know of the show, she just gets dragged right back into it.
I
But
mean, that's just the Loki way.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I can see her more in that Enchantress role than I do seeing her like play, you know, the female version of Loki, which we'll get into that in a little bit. Um, you want to take on Mobius?
Sure. So Mobius, good old Mobius, he's very simple. He's very simple minded. There was no like, extravagant thing about him.
I love Owen Wilson, by the way.
Oh no, I he's like, I agree. I think he did
Yeah.
a really good job playing this character, and you know, eh, when he's like, wow, yeah, I can't even do it.
Wow.
What do you do with it? But like, when you look at Mobius, right? So he's very simple. I mean, the fact that he goes into that pie room and he eats key lime pie, like literally just so like he can like think about like what are the next steps and like it's like it's like a planning room for him. You
Yeah,
know what
so
I mean?
yeah, he's an agent of the TVA.
Well, if you let me
and-
get there, I was gonna go there.
We're getting there. But he does specialize in investigating time variance. Is basically what his role is.
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm
Yeah, no
glad,
problem.
even though I just was talking about pie for a second, I mean, you just wanted to go
I'm
around it.
just steamrolling my way right through it.
Yeah, well, no kidding. I was trying
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get there. But, anyways, yes, he befriends Loki. Okay. So, because at first, like, he was trying to say, hey, you're a variant, you're a criminal, and no, you don't need to be friends. But,
I
like,
love that they go to Pompeii.
okay, no, I
Like,
agree. That was in the first season, if you didn't guys know
yeah,
this.
yeah,
But, like, and they were like, at one point, they were getting screwed. Like, they needed to get the hell out of there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like, it's interesting how they like it, I think I love their banter and like the wittiness between them both. It kind of reminds me of me and Matt a little bit. But no, it's just it's nice to see how like, you're talking about like a human, right? And then in a god, kind of like mindsets, but like, you look at the both of them and you kind of think to yourself like, how would this relationship work if like let's say they didn't meet in the TVA and like if they just met out like in the real world, because like if Mobius looked at him and be like, "You're kind of an asshole because you were just about to take over the entire Earth and like universe, and now I want to be friends with you." Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it'd be a totally different setting if like the TVA really wasn't even a thing,
Right.
But like, when you look at how, um, Mobius, especially I would say in the second season, like, for example, like Loki's like doing these time slips. Okay, I know I'm kind of going back and forth here, but like you see how they're. I would say in the beginning of like the second season, it's like you're seeing him go back and forth in time, and he's like, "Wait, what's going on right now?" And so of course he's like, "Oh, let's go meet OB or Boris," which we'll talk about in a little bit
Yeah.
here. But like, it's interesting to see how their dynamic in the beginning of the first season, and then leading up to the second. It's like those two didn't like each other in the very first season. Like it was like a very kind of like back and forth. They started to slowly become friends, and then it was like this second season. It was like, oh, I guess you're my best friend now. you know, even though,
Yeah, I mean, I think Loki still had that mentality, though. He's like, I'm a god of in Asgard. Like, how dare you take me? Kind of like mentality.
but I mean, he was more trusted because he realized, when they like, especially in the beginning of like the second season, they were like, you guys are living a lie. Like this is a complete lie right now because like once him and Sylvie like take over or really kill like he who remains and like they take over the TVA, and B-15 and like all of them are like trying to like maintain the TVA in a sense.
Yeah.
Like once he says, "Hey, like this is all like false. Like we need to like figure out what's going on." I mean, yeah, you start to realize like they're like, "Wow," now they're like, "Well, what do we do now?" But Mobius is trying to like, I feel like in a lot of ways trying to maintain the peace. And trying to like manage like what's going on as best as he can, but like he's okay at being a leader, but I don't see him being like the new like ruler of like the TVA. I think more of like kind of like B-15. Like she was kind of really kind of managing the reins while he's doing his own thing with Loki.
Yeah.
But like it was hard for him to kind of manage both Loki and then trying to, try to oversee the whole problem and be like, what do I do? She's basically he's not like Renslayer, in that regard. And I know that's someone we'll talk about later, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's that kind of thing. But Mobius, like I said, I think as a whole, I think he's more of a very simple, very laid back.
Yeah.
Like,
Very passive. Like,
and it's funny, like sometimes
he definitely knows what he's doing, but I think he just takes that like passivity.
right. And I also think that like when he's trying to be the bad guy, like he tries a little too hard because like he's a laid back guy. He's not really like trying to be like a jerk. He's not trying to be like that. No, what he does is he'll just kind of wait for Loki to kind of like step in and then be
Right.
the bad guy. But
Right.
like even though, but for him, he tries to be the good guy as best as he can. And then of course, like you'll see in the second season that Loki tries to take over at let's say a simple interrogation, and then he's like, no, no, we don't need to do that. And it's like in some ways, I mean, granted, you'll see in the second season, but like they're good at that's why they're good at partners, like being partners as a whole because like they just work well together in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does kind of reveal that, Mobius has been there a significant amount of time and has, you know, undergone like several memory wipes, which is why like he really doesn't know. I mean, they all kind of
Yeah.
don't know their past. So that's
Well, that's right. That's one thing you do learn,
in the
in the
second
second
season.
season.
Yeah.
But like, um, yes, you know what? I'll talk about this next one. So like in science fiction, this is an episode. Okay, so Mobius is revealed to be a temporal variant of Dawn, who is a jet ski salesman from 2022 from Cleveland, Ohio, who is also the single father of two sons, Kevin and Sean. Now, it's funny when you look at him like that, because when
I
I
love
saw
the
that,
scene when he's on the jet ski and the fans blowing his hair, and you think he's like on the water, but he's like in the side of a store.
it reminds me of like a 1980s commercial or something like that. Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly what it would be like. But like, it was like he didn't really like change persona a little bit. Like when you're looking at him in that, versus like Mobius as a whole.
Yeah, and I kind of don't picture him being a great salesman either.
No, I feel like it would be terrible.
I think he was like he's just too passive. He's like, okay, well, we got some of these in the back if you want, and
He's like, well, it's it's the price is like $500. Yeah, maybe I'll give it to $300.
Wow.
Wow, guys, wow. Anyways,
Yeah.
so like some other interesting characters. So Miss Minutes, man, I don't know about you, but in the second season,
She's kind of a bitch.
well, no, why
Yeah.
was she flirting with Victor Timely, man? Like, did you? That was the one scene.
She was straight up evil in the
No,
second
I know,
season.
but like she was like, I wish I was a
'cause-
real woman and blah blah blah. Like
Well,
she
I
was
mean,
like really
Victor-
psycho in that.
Victor Timely Kang, He Who Remains was the one who created Miss Minutes. So
No, but-
that's where I think that fatuation comes where, yeah, she is an AI, but it's one of those like, like Skynet kind of thing. Like she has that kind of mentality where she was using, I think, Victor Timely to complete the certain tasks that He Who Remains needed Victor Timely to complete.
No, I know that, but what I'm trying to say is like when she became a psychotic, like that was a little aggressive, like for what it was. And I mean, now granted, I understand AI and everything else, but like she was like right up on his grill and like
Well,
to
like I
another
said,
degree. I mean, she was about to like
she
jump.
had a mission that was her
Right,
her programming. So I think that's like he really wasn't at that point in time. Like Victor Timely wasn't that type of character, which we didn't know what type of character Victor Timely would be.
Right, because we didn't know at that time.
But he's really, yeah, sure, you can say he's the catalyst of the whole thing, but he really wasn't that character that I think Miss Minutes expected him to be and to hit those certain milestones. So that's where you kind of get like, well, if I was a real person and, he just kind of was freaking out and.
I mean, yeah, I mean, with Miss Minutes, though, I mean, she was like in the first season, she really wasn't there. Like not as much as we would like probably have seen her, but like in the second season, she was, well, for the most part, she was there for quite a bit. But then
You could say that she was pretty much like the mastermind of everything that was kind of happening.
well, for the most part, I mean, during the first few episodes, and of course, once they turned her off, then that was the end of that. But like,
Yeah.
She's, I think she's okay for character wise. I mean, she's not like.
I mean,
the
I dig
greatest.
I dig the kind of old style Disney cartoonish kind of design. Like I
Right.
do, with the big eyes and a little, smiley mouth. Like I dig the style of it. And then her Southern accent was just like for a character, like it was just spot on. Like when you just hear it and.
No, I mean for what it was, I mean, like I think it was a great job for that, that kind of style and animation and so forth. But like,
But I do like in the second season when they, Renslayer's kind of like, well, we're not going to be that inconspicuous with a giant animated clock, running around. And then Miss Minutes kind of goes into like an old fashioned clock. Like it's like black
Oh,
and
yeah,
white
yeah.
and like all kind of old fashioned looking. And she's like, is that better? Like,
Well, you're like, no.
No, you're still a freaking clock.
No, well, not even that. You're like animated, but not even that too. I mean, it was like, oh, actually, one of my other favorites was when like they're out in the it's like the fair or whatever it was, and like she's
I think like 1863, I believe.
yeah, and like so she's like, all right, Miss Minutes, go ahead and do your thing, and then she like turns into this like raging monster clock, whatever the hell it was.
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
like,
She gets like wicked huge. Yeah.
and then you're like, okay, cool. Like they just start running out, and they're just like, ah, and you're like, oh, did you like my performance? And I'm like, okay, weirdo, but sure, it was fine, whatever the
Yeah.
case is. But like, all right, moving on from Miss Minutes because we've already described her. But like, so B15. So I thought I forgot. So I thought B15 was the one that. Yeah, no, B15 is the
She's a hunter.
okay, it wasn't the other guy that they captured.
No, that was X5, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, because I was trying to remember exactly. So yeah, B15.
Well, he was. I mean, he was a hunter too, but
Right, but like he wanted to be like a famous actor and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You'll be able to watch it, but like so B15 is I don't I don't even know what to call her. Like she's like supporting, but not like she's not always there.
she's not always there. But she was more so present in the second season.
Oh yeah.
Here and there. But, yeah, I mean, she was a hunter, and the hunters for the TVA basically prune the timeline to keep the sacred timeline kind of in check. So when there's somebody who doesn't belong in a certain timeline, these guys would prune them so that there's not a new branch.
Basically what Loki did from the very beginning.
Right. And if he wasn't helping to find Sylvie, basically the threat was like, you can either help us or we can prune you.
Which means he wouldn't exist.
Yes. So obviously,
He's gonna want to stay around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ravonna Renslayer, so she was important, especially in the first season. And then we really find out in the second season really who she was, which I found that very interesting.
yeah, that was definitely like, kind of her playing that hand with He Who Remains. And I don't know if you got that far.
Oh no, I did. That was I do
Um,
remember getting that far.
But then when, He Who Remains wiped her memory, it kind of like reset, like
No,
reset
yeah,
all
it was,
that. So it was,
I mean, it was kind of like, I mean, I hate saying this, boys and girls, but like if you could restart a relationship and like make people forget certain mistakes that you've made, I mean, yeah, it would be great, but like that's also the wrong answer to be doing. But this guy was just like, yeah, I don't like that. I'm gonna make like Miss Minutes would be like, or he would say, hey, do protocol, whatever it was, and tell Miss Minutes to do whatever, and like literally wipe everybody. So it wasn't even just Renslayer. So that's why
Yeah.
Mobius really didn't have a clue on who he
well, it's
really was. On
really,
the honest
none of them really had a clue,
Well, no,
and
right.
where the TVA is too, the like time works differently. So that, they're not aging, they're staying exactly how they are.
But like the one thing about Mobius, I'll say this is like it was interesting how Loki was asking him like, okay, would you want to see what your old life was? And he's like, no, not really. You know what I mean? Like he was like, me,
Yeah.
whatever. And it was just like, kind of a quick thing. But it's like I find that interesting only because like everyone else was like, yeah, I want to know. I want to know what's gonna go on with my previous life or whatever. And like he's the only one that's like, no, I'm good eating my key lime pie and not knowing what could have been, in that sense. And he's just kind of like, now that in our case, like he did, now he's a jet ski salesman and everything else. It's like, okay, like, I mean, yeah, it's okay, but like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Matt? Real quick, like, if you were a TVA agent or like person in there, let's say you didn't have any idea, like you had the life that you had now, and you were one of them, would you want to know if you had no idea?
I mean, it's tough. I think I would want to know, but it would be kind of like the same situation I think that Wanda faced in WandaVision where, she obviously wants her kids back.
Oh yeah, I get that.
But then when you see that the kids are happy with, that version of her in that timeline or whatever you want to call it,
right.
um, it was like she can't just go and kill them and then take her place. Like, obviously, the kids will already know that it's not her, and she sees them kind of scared. But I think it's like a kind of the same situation. Like, if I gone and seen who I was in whatever timeline I existed in, I'm gonna be watching myself in that life. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, like if I had the chance, if it was like a one-on-one replacement, like I'm replacing that person, but what happens to that person? You can argue we're the same person, but where I'm coming from, being part of the TVA or whatever I'm doing, that person has no idea.
No, I agree. I mean, it's not an easy decision to make.
And
I
so
mean,
I
plain
think
and
that
simple.
that's where Mobius was coming from. Like, if he was able to see where he was and, like, being a dad with two kids, this version of Mobius doesn't have kids. He works for the TVA.
Well, and that's what I mean. It's
So
kind
he
of
he doesn't know these kids. He doesn't know what they like. He doesn't know like anything about what's going on in their world. So
I
I can
mean,
kind of see that, like, you know,
well, no, I agree. I mean, if it was me, I'd probably feel like the same way. I mean, I'd want to see what could have been, and then be like, well, clearly that is not the life that I have, and then I would have to accept whatever role that I would have to be in. But like, if let's say in this case, like, we're like Mobius now, where he's with his kids and doing whatever, and then you believe some crazy guy saying, hey, you were actually a part of the TVA and blah 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 blah, and you're like, no, it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, so it's trying to like kind of see how both sides would work, but like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think we're like Mobius, man. We're just like, I guess we're just gonna do whatever floats our boats. Like it's just what
Right.
it is.
Um, He Who Remains and Victor Timely, obviously they're Kang variants.
Right.
But I think what was interesting, and I think this is the narrative that they were pushing with He Who Remains. One, he was with the TVA, he was keeping the sacred timeline in check. But I think he was only really trying to keep that in check so that the other Kangs didn't create a war. If I have that correct.
Well, and that's the interesting part because like you look at Ant-Man, right, and you
Yeah.
look at how that end scene kind of played, because they even agreed that Kang that screwed up. They're like, well, I guess we're gonna have to fix it ourselves. Because that's kind of where I feel like it was kind of leading into. Like if one screwed up, then they're like, okay, well now we're gonna take it on our own hands. And then there was like thousands of Kangs just ready to go and like take over the world or do whatever that is, what they were trying to do in that accomplishment. But um, I don't know where that's gonna lead because also since we've talked about it, they're gonna probably have to prune the character as a whole because unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see, the guy who's
It's
Jonathan Majors who
really,
plays
I
him.
mean,
But
it's really that question of like, yes, we now know that there are Kang variants. And we've seen Loki variants, which we're gonna get to in a minute, because there's a bunch of them.
oh, there's crap
Um,
ton.
Not all the Loki variants look the same. So it is possible, like, yeah, and I realize they've already showed the scene where all the different, Kangs are, the Council of Kangs are talking. But honestly, you could probably recast Kang to someone who might look similar and might play that role. I wouldn't say similar, but somebody who would fit that role. And it could be easily explained that they're Kang variants, so they don't all have to look the same.
No, I get what you're saying, but like it sucks because like now
It
you're having to redo
it
everything.
definitely would suck, and I think with the ending of Loki, it still would make sense if they decided to move away from Kang and went to like a Doctor Doom.
Well, now
But Kang is still in Secret War, so
right? How do you explain that?
how do you explain that? So if they're not going with Jonathan Majors, you're not going to have Kang in Secret Wars because he plays a pretty big role in that story.
Right, but and that's the thing. So where does Marvel move from here? We don't know. I
I
guess
don't
we'll
know.
find out in the next couple of years. But
But I think, He Who Remains, like, we kinda looked at him as a Kang variant. After Ant-Man came out, obviously, like, we're kinda looking at him like, "Oh, he must be like the other Kangs." But I really think, like, Victor Timely was more of the innocent, like, didn't really know what his future was.
Yeah, and I mean, he was kind of one of the ones that I feel like. So, like in the original like comics, I mean, Kang was also, as well, probably most people hopefully would know, is like technically he's a descendant of Reed Richards, which that's more later on. But like he also traveled in the past to do different things that kind of change the future and so on and so forth. So that's why Victor Timely in this case, I mean, granted, he was kind of more of a innocent type of Kang, but like it's kind of hard to say like what Kang was trying to accomplish back in that time frame, or like because we even saw different variants of like him being like a pharaoh in like different areas
Right.
of times, and so whether or not he was trying to like basically kind of be like, I wish I could remember this guy's name, but like in DC, there's a guy that basically was a caveman and then was super smart to get it from like a meteorite or whatever, but like kind of the same idea where he's like all over the place. He was known as different things, but like he was there because of time and every event that was going on. He could manipulate history. He was there. He could basically become one of the strongest and most powerful beings on the planet and so on and so forth. But like
Yeah.
it's in that case with Kang, it's like he was there throughout time, so he knows things, and that's why he was one of the most powerful beings to be able to do that. But like again, being from the future and then go to the past, it's a
Yeah,
whole
and then,
mess.
you do kinda find more about, what Kang was doing. I mean, what not Kang, what He Who Remains was doing in that season finale. Um, because you do learn, like, even though Sylvie technically killed him, Loki goes back to that point
Of course,
and is attempting to stop her, which goes several times over and over and over and over again.
not
And
surprising.
every time he tries to stop her, she finds another way to kill him. And that's like the whole thing. Like, He Who Remains actually stops Sylvie. Like, time stops her. And they have this whole conversation. Like, do you really think that this is the way I was going to let things play out? Like, you're just destroying the timeline and letting all these Kangs go around? Like, and it's kind of like that. Like, he wanted Loki to kill Sylvie, which he refused to do, which is why you have those scenes where he's trying to fix the loom.
Right.
And, the very ending of it, he kind of embraces like who he's really meant to be and essentially creates that god of stories, Loki, that we've seen images in the main like graphic. You We've seen
Right.
what he looks like. Um a couple more characters kind of just go quickly because we are running out of time here, but um Ouroboros.
I would.
That guy kills it.
Well, so it's funny. He was actually from the original Goonies. So I know it's like kind of like a little side topic, but like this, the original actor was in the original Goonies,
Yeah.
and like he's in a couple movies now. But like he's just perfect, man.
He's awesome.
He's just
Yeah.
great at what he does. I mean, granted, his character's like the basically on the same level as he remains of like like scientific at like capacity. Like he knows everything about like what needs to happen, and it's just funny like when they talk and they're like, "Oh, we're screwed. I guess we're gonna die now." And it's like, "Wait,
Yeah.
what?" And
Yeah.
they're like, "Whatever." And I'm like, "You're like, no, like we're about to die." And he's like, "Well, I mean, unless we could find a way to do this," and like he would explain it, but like, and he was like, "Well, I guess we're screwed." And then he would like, go off and do something else, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Wait a minute,
No,
no, that's not how this
Obi
works."
was definitely like the second season like favorite character of
Oh,
mine.
absolutely.
Um, let's talk Loki variants because there's a lot of them.
And thank God we're not talking about General Docs because I have no idea really.
That was the older lady.
No, I know,
Yeah,
but
in
like
the
there was
second season, she was trying to.
like take over.
She basically was trying to prune every single, like,
She really
you know,
wasn't that important. I'm just gonna say that right now.
not really. She dies in a box, but
That too.
yeah. So there is one variant of Loki called the boastful Loki, or at least he's dubbed that by the creators of the show. He's kind of the bigger one. He wields a hammer. the thing with this variant is he does make like wild exaggerations about his accomplishments, which includes claiming to have defeated both Captain America and Iron Man and obtaining the Infinity Stones.
I mean, I remember a little bit about him,
He's
but like,
actually the one that betrays them. You know, the classic the kid Loki, the alligator variant, and he allies with the President Loki variant. Um,
okay.
so he's the kind of one that like kind of betrays all the other characters.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just gonna say it. My favorite, honestly, out of them all was the alligator. Like, it was. I mean, granted, he was innocent, but like, it was just funny. Like, especially him and against the president, Loki. It was just like he's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And then he's like trying to beat him up, and he's like trying to fight him.
I think what's funny is like the director using like a cartoony stuffed alligator during filming, so they knew you know what to interact with during filming. Like
That's I actually did not know that, but that's actually kind of funny how they.
that's kind of funny. Like you're just
That's like
looking at like a cartoony like stuffed alligator, like pretending it's like the real alligator, which they CGI'd after. Um, the most popular I think in here. There's two of them that are actually probably the most popular. Kid Loki, which he created a Nexus event by killing Thor. He considers himself the king of the void. Um, only the classic Loki, the alligator Loki, really respect that title. But he is based on another Marvel comic of the same name. So,
Hmm.
more, he could be more of a reference, I guess, to the story that Thor had told Bruce Banner and Valkyrie in Ragnarok. That when Loki attacked him when he was 8 and he stabbed him, like he kind of tells that story.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like I said, a lot of these variants are kind of like,
They
especially in
have,
the
I
first
mean,
season, they were only
they
there for a
do
little
have
bit.
their own. I don't know so much of a boastful Loki, but I do remember Alligator Loki having their own books because there's also a Frog Thor, which I
Well,
think that they made a hint at.
right, but it was also like, it was a Spider Ham, and like, it was like the world of like all animals that
Yeah,
being
Marvel
like
Pets or
Avengers. Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, classic Loki, which is an older variant of Loki. He grew old in an isolated planet, um, but he was able to conjure like more larger and elaborate illusions than the actual Loki that's in the show, like the main
Right.
character Loki. And what was cool about him is he actually had the 1960s comic book
Right.
accurate
Design.
costume. So that was pretty cool.
I mean, I've noticed that Marvel, not even just this show. I mean, like you look at WandaVision and a few others. Like, I'm glad that Marvel at least is going back in time and
Yeah,
like
they put the
showing
little
these
Easter
characters.
eggs in
Yeah.
because like her Wanda's costume, not the Scarlet Witch one, mind you, the Halloween costume in the
Right. Right.
show
Right.
was her classic, and Vision actually had
Was the
his
same
on.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think even I don't know if Quicksilver, like even though they showed him like really quick in that, but like did he have his original costume too?
Yeah, but it was the other kid that was playing Quicksilver.
Well, right.
Yeah.
The one that we know from the newer, I guess, X-Men, I guess if you want to call it. But yeah, no, that's what I figured.
Yeah. President Loki, which John doesn't remember.
Not as much. I mean, yes, he's the black guy on the show. Yes, that's what it was.
But he became president in his timeline, and that's him becoming president created a Nexus event, um, which is why he's in the void because he got pruned. And he does attempt to rule the void with an army of other variants and is at odds with Kid Loki. Hiddleston actually called President Loki the worst of the bad bunch. He described him as the least vulnerable, most autocratic, and terrifyingly ambitious character who seems to have no empathy or care for anyone else.
Hmm.
So there is a Vote Loki comic book series. He basically is just like Loki with the horns and he's wearing a suit. I think
Right.
that's pretty much what he looks like. When Loki goes back to the TVA, they show like a hologram, like holographic versions of Loki. And so there's one with blue skin of a frost giant. There's another one wearing like a yellow jersey of the Tour de France, and he's holding a trophy. There's a third with a Hulk like heavily muscled form, a bearded variant with hooves, and a more traditional Viking version of Loki. So they kind of show those. You can kind of see some of them, like when there's like that scene where they're all kind of looking down in this pit where they were trapped in.
Oh,
So
no, yeah.
you can kind of see some of maybe not these ones that were like in the holograms, but you can kind of see like other variants of Loki. But
I mean, clearly I needed to watch season 1 again because like some of this is kind of a blur since it's been what, like
it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. But I do like. I mean, one of the things with season 1 is it does fully set up the multiverse within Marvel and introduces Kang as He Who Remains to the MCU.
Well, and that was kind of like really the starting point because like, you already saw No Way Home at that point, right? And then, I mean, well, actually, no. Now I'm thinking about it. It was Loki, and then it was No Way Home,
Right.
and you don't really like kind of put two and two together yet, But it was nice that they started to show you like, hey, we're focusing on the multiverse saga, But like it was nice that they did a TV show based on kind of the same thing, and then like bring everything else in,
Yeah.
Because I feel like if they didn't do that, ooh, Marvel would have been slapped in the face a few times because I'd be like, "What are you doing? This is like the perfect moment to be doing this right now."
Yeah. They kind of introducing that multiverse and the different timelines. But a theme of the show definitely is like discovering your purpose and identity.
Wow.
That's like a huge part of the show is you're going kind of through this journey of Loki being a villain to completely changing and finding, it's funny too, John, like the very first episode of season 1 is called Glorious Purpose. Do you know what the last
Yeah.
episode's called?
What's that?
Glorious Purpose.
Wow.
So, he goes from in Avengers, yelling at them saying like, I'm a god, I have glorious, like, I have this glorious purpose, to being at the end of the TV, this television show, and, in the season finale, to actually embracing this like purpose that he actually has.
Hmm. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, I mean, it's a l- it's. I'm not surprised with Disney, but like it's a life lesson, right? I mean, granted, we Disneyfy. I'm going to use that as a term, Disneyfy. Like they make it, very like, oh, we're going to make it all happy, but they do tell a good story depending on what it is, and they actually give you a lesson from it. But like in this
Sometimes.
case, sometimes okay, maybe okay, you're right, maybe sometimes, but like in this case, it's like it's nice to see that you look at a villain who then realizes his true purpose, and then be like, you know what, hey, everyone needs to know where they need to go. I mean, they may not know in that moment, but we're gonna get there. God damn it! Like we're gonna make sure that this person knows exactly what their true purpose is at the end.
Yeah. So some of the cool things that I liked from season 1 were the Loki variants. I do like the alligator Loki. Like
I
seeing
told
that
you.
like animal version of Loki was kind of fun.
It was funny, and it was nice to
Um,
see that they
and
could do that.
yeah, I mean, as a side note, like there are Marvel animal versions of most of the Avengers and other characters. Like Thor is a frog,
Right?
so that was kind of cool, like showing that. Um, Classic Loki conjuring the entire Asgard, background. Like he conjured up Asgard in the void, which was enough to distract Azeroth, right? That's what his name was.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, which was kind of like this void beast,
I don't know what
kind
to
of
call
like a
him.
purple beast.
Well, no, and you're right, but I don't know what to really call it. I mean, it doesn't really have like a
Yeah.
specific name, but
Season 1 also, when Loki first gets there, um, as he's getting processed, like they pull out this draw, and in this draw is basically like handfuls of Infinity Stones, which is interesting when you think about it, because up until that point, that's the thing that Loki was looking for this whole time.
right
He
now
was in search of the stones because he was really working, for Thanos.
Right.
who was in search of the stones, and now he's literally standing in the TVA in front of a drawer full of Infinity Stones, in which these guys are like, "Oh yeah, they're just paperweights. They don't do anything here."
It's the truth, though. I mean, because like time doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this like bowl of gummy bears. Like you want to grab them and like run, but like they don't do anything there.
No,
Like
you're right.
so, it's kind of like a funny,
I mean,
having
maybe
spent so much time like seeking these stones, like they're sitting there right in front of them, and they're basically just drunk in a junk drawer.
right. I mean, I mean, now if this Loki understood like what would happen moving forward, especially the events that we were just talking about, yeah, he might want to take those and then run and maybe not want to go back to Thanos at that
I mean,
point. But
it's one
yeah,
of those things. Like, imagine if he actually was able to grab a couple of them,
yeah, and then be able to actually control.
because he actually does go to real world places in season 1 and season 2.
And he could have done a lot.
He could have
He
done a
could
lot,
have
and
changed the whole timelines and everything. Yeah,
he could have done a lot. And then the last thing from season 1 is, I guess, like seeing the timeline kind of branching out, and the creation of the multiverse was kind of the overarching like question of like, where do we go from here? And like we kind of see that in Spider-Man, we see that in Doctor Strange. We're still kind of unraveling what this all means. Um, but I mean, I love this show. Like season 1 was really great, and I think it's great to invest in this character. Season 2, obviously, this continues his journey to discover purpose. Um, we see more of like what Loki's abilities are, which is,
right.
in the movies, like we see what he can do, but the show really kind of outlines, like, especially like when he's teaming up with Sylvie, like that whole, like when they're holding hands and they just blast that whole crew of, you know,
Oh yeah, yep.
Dox's, like, guys, the hunters. Um, we get to see another Kang variant, and then basically Renslayer and Miss Minutes becoming villains.
Which I found interesting because, like, when you look at Renslayer in the beginning, it's just like, oh, she's nice, she's happy, she's going. She's trying to like maintain a little bit of the order, right? And then,
Yeah.
Miss Minutes again. We don't really get to see her as much. So you're not really getting to see like the true Miss Minutes. And then, like when you saw them both do that, I mean, they're both psychotic. Like once you start to see like how they really act, it's
Yeah.
like, and then like when that, like we said, that one scene when she was meeting with um he who remains, and then granted, of course, it's more like the story of like what was going on. You kind of feel bad for Renslayer because she's like, wait, this is all I've been living, and like I never known this was actually going on.
Right. She's just as much of a victim as everybody else is, I think.
And then like Miss Minutes, I mean, I'm gonna say it. I'm sorry. This is why I said we're explicit now, but she's a bitch. Like she
Yeah.
legit, like the fact that she knows, the whole thing, the whole
She knows
damn
the whole
time.
thing, and everything that she was doing was basically at the command of He Who Remains, trying to keep the TVA doing what they were doing. And that's where you kind of find out, like, He Who Remains, like I said before, like the whole thing he was trying to do with the TVA was prevent all these Kangs from spreading to other timelines.
Right. He was trying to secure the timeline.
Because he knows that, like, if they go beyond where they're supposed to be, there's going to be an all-out war, and that's what he tells, in season 1. That's what he tells them, like, if you kill me, you guys will be at war.
Right. So whether you have me or others, and that's kind of like what we said about Ant-Man. Like because of that council, we were wondering,
And that's
is
pretty. I
that
mean,
part of it?
that's pretty much what opened. The end of season 2. That's what pretty much opens that door,
Right.
because the loom is destroyed, and spoiler alert, if you guys haven't seen it, this is when you want to pause this episode, go watch it, and then come back. But we see Loki taking on that form of the god of stories,
Right.
and he's literally taking every single branch, and he forms it into like kind of the tree of life, and he's sitting in the center of it. Which, if you know anything about Loki, god of stories, he's one that's aware of his own story, but he's also aware that everybody else's story exists within within these branches, and the god of stories is able to actually go in and change people's narratives.
Well, I mean, in Loki's defense, I mean, if it's kind of cool in some ways. I mean, but now he needs to be very careful because once you start screwing up everything else, it
Right.
doesn't mean like you can reverse everything and do all that. So it's like, again, I understand he's a god and he's the god of mischief and things like that, but like you need to be very careful on who you choose and how you change it and all this other stuff. Because if you think about it now, like if let's say moving forward, you know, unfortunately, which I know we'll get to that at some point, it would be nice to maybe see him, continue said role and so on and so forth. But if if cameos were only allowed and so on and so forth, then I mean I get it, but like it would be interesting to see how he could be an important role in said like Secret Wars or things like that down the road because
Right.
who knows? Maybe he does maybe he'll become like Red Skull being like, the protector of the Soul Stone, but like only
Yeah, I
show up in
mean,
those scenes.
Loki, it's really tough because one of the things that he went on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and he's played Loki for 14 years.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about it
That's
like that.
that's crazy to play a character for that long. Um,
Well, hold
so
on.
one of the
Are you
things
sure
that
14 years?
that's what he said on the show, 14 years.
That's a lie. Because I mean, think about it. I mean, he only showed up in Avengers, the very first movie.
Yeah.
He didn't show up in Thor. Not that I remember. Oh, actually, now did he? I'm trying to remember now. Was he?
I trust more what Tom Hiddleston says than probably you, John.
Hey, you know what? I'm just saying. I just see it seems weird that it's like 14 years. That's just me.
Um, yeah, but he basically states on the Tonight Show that it's the end of a 14-year run as Loki. And so, I don't know what that means as far as him saying it, like maybe him as a leading man in movies and a show. Um, I don't see him being done completely with Loki. Because I can tell you one thing, John.
Hmm.
If Disney and Marvel ends this run with Tom Hiddleston as Loki, you're going to see a whole lot more people turn away. Just because of the popularity of the character Loki, especially if they have somebody else like Sylvie taking up that role. It's not the same flavor, I guess you could say. Like it's not the same. Like Tom Hiddleston brings something to Loki that this actor that plays Sylvie just doesn't have. And so I would see him still have a role, like maybe cameos in Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, because Loki still plays a part in those stories. So it's just one of those things. Like I don't know. I don't see like, and one of my biggest fears is seeing Sylvie take up that Loki role. Like we're supposed to just, you know, somebody gives you a sandwich with like macaroni loaf in it, and you're like, this is gross. What is this?
Okay.
That's Sylvie taking over.
All right. Hold on a minute. So I'm gonna go back to Tom Hiddleston for a second. So he started out in okay. So he did start on the first Thor. Okay. 14 years from 2011. That'd be 2025. We're not in 2025, so I'm going to say he's been doing it for 13 years. Actually, no, sorry, 12 years. But the point
It's
is,
still close enough.
whatever. Well, he's off
Yeah.
by 2 years because I don't want to hear it. But anyways, the thing is with Tom Hiddleston, I agree. He's one of those characters that he's done a fantastic job. He's done the role so well. I mean, it was funny in like one of his early interviews, like he was actually going for the role of Thor originally. And they thought, he was like, they're like, we're not gonna really go with that. And then they chose him to be Loki. I mean, I don't know how well he would have done as Thor, but I think he'd done so well at Loki that you're right. I mean, unfortunately, like we've already lost so many good characters, like so many actors
Right.
that have been in these roles. So you're already like, trying to stave like those characters, like Tom Hiddleston being Loki and, so on and so forth. So it's like the more you get rid of these characters and you start throwing in the other characters like Sylvie and so on and so forth, I agree. I feel like you're going to start losing a lot of people because, like, your OG, kind of characters like that, they're all gone. I mean, like, granted, like you look at Chris Hemsworth playing Thor, but like, how long is he really going to play Thor? Like to a degree, like you know what I mean. Like he's been playing it for so long now that he's in the same boat. Like he's
Yeah, and
he's gonna get going.
I actually saw a thing that's saying like the director that has directed most of the Thors, I can never pronounce his name.
Taika Waititi.
Yeah, that guy.
Waititi.
Um,
Yep.
that he's not like going to be the director of if they do a Thor 5. Like that's what Disney has already
I
decided.
mean, here's the thing.
Whether that's true or not, I have no idea, but
Here's the
I,
problem.
I would love them to do a Thor movie where he goes back to like Norse mythology, like still, you can still have that Marvel comedy that they do, but I think you need to go more serious and quit the the gags, if you will, because Love and Thunder was like a parody of Thor.
Here's the problem, though. You've already beaten Thor with a dead horse. Like you've already done so much that what you can ever do. That's fine, whatever. You call it a day at that point. I've already told you the one character that they should have done a long time ago that they needed to redeem was actually, it's funny, that bull that's right in front of you. What is it, man?
I don't know. All I can see is green fingers.
It's your favorite character of all time.
Well, we both said this though. I
Right.
mean,
No,
the,
but I'm
the
just
the the
saying.
one character that they've done dirty was Hulk,
Right. But it's the
and
one character.
She-Hulk did not make it any better.
No, and the worst part is that if, because you and I talked about it beforehand, but like if they decided to bring Scar into the mix of the young Avengers and not even look
Not
at,
how they animated him in She-Hulk. They're not going to do that.
I would hope not, because they need to, it's like the whole Sonic thing that I talked about before. They better change him up, because if he looks like that now, you
Yeah.
better be changing what he actually looks like in the actual movies.
Yeah.
But
Let me shift gears for a little bit here.
oh, now we're gonna shift
Um,
gears. Okay.
Just finish like the thoughts on season on Loki as a TV show. Um, like we said before, like by far this is like the best of the best when it comes to Marvel TV shows because the rest of them are not really that great. And when I look at Loki, like I see all 12 episodes as one complete story. Like it's not just like, oh, it's season 1 and season 2. No, like you're gonna watch anything, like you gotta watch the whole thing as Loki's complete, you know, journey. Um, but I do wish that they did more one-off shows, like with more of the legacy characters, like Iron Man and Steve Rogers, Captain America. Like invested more in those characters because you can do more in TV shows than you can in movies. Like you only get like that kind of like little glimpse of what's happening in that scenario.
So like so I can agree on Captain America, because like you could do something with World War II and in something in regards to that. Iron Man, you probably could. It just depends on.
It's tough when you have 3 movies and you know you know the character, but I think that there are still a ton of narratives that you can do with Iron Man. There's still a ton you can do with the Steve Rogers Captain America. And it just kind of sucks that like we have this Sam Wilson who's now Captain America, but we've not seen him since Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Right, and that's the problem. It's like when you go multiple years now.
A character that he's freaking Captain America. Like we should be seeing him in practically everything.
I wouldn't say everything, but at least enough where you can see him more as like that character and that character development. But like that's the problem. It's like, when you look at Steve Rogers Captain America, granted he showed up, same time as Thor in this case, and that timeline, but you know, he was still. I mean, granted, they showed him, and then literally the next year, Avengers came out. Like
Right.
that's
And then it was
exactly what it
like,
was.
they had another Captain America, and then they had, you do Civil War, and then there's another,
Right.
you get to see these characters more so than not. And
And it's funny, a lot of those like characters. Like when you look at Winter Soldier and whatnot. I mean, granted, that was the first time you actually got to even see Black Panther. And but we never saw Black Panther until, of course, later on in like Civil War and whatnot. And then granted, we finally got Black Panther and so forth. But like you know, it introduced like Captain America's like character, like in those movies, like they showed very important key elements of like the
yeah,
story, and that was the thing. So, but I agree, like yes, if they did more, like what they should have done is also really Hulk. Like if they'd have made a movie and a TV show related to Hulk and really embodied his character, I think that would have been a great kind of segue too. But
yeah. I mean, they definitely need to focus more if they're doing these TV shows, not focus on like pushing the narrative. Like obviously Loki has the multiverse narrative. But what Loki did wasn't just focused on the multiverse. What they did was they focused on developing him as a character, and that's where it really sucks if it's like, yeah, well, we developed him as a character and now he's gone.
well, you're right because like now, like what does that really tell you? Like it just shows you basically like
Yeah.
it's the second season. All it shows you is like, okay, there's a TVA and they're trying to fix it, and even then like the what was it like episode 5 of season 2, you know, granted, Loki's trying to get everyone back together, get the gang back, but then like all of a sudden they
Well,
all
the TVA does morph into, I think, really trying to control the different Kang variants.
no, right. But what I'm saying is like if literally in episode 5, like it was like towards the end, it was like all of a sudden you just see things start disappearing again because everyone's like, oh well, I guess we're not gonna you know basically save the TVA. It was kind of like they still kind of went back to their old lives, but like, but old Sylvie was like, oh, whatever, I'm not going to help you. And then like, she starts to see that, literally everything's starting to go spaghetti mode, and like it just starts pruning itself, and like, like, Loki's not lying to you. It's just like you're just not believing in what he's saying, and like that was the
Yeah.
thing that, you know, if you start to look at that, it's important to understand like that is an important scene to remember like moving forward because like that's what Loki was trying to do from the very beginning of even the episode 5, like but like even in 6 it's like he's trying to figure out a way to like stop the whole world, basically all the timelines from imploding on themselves. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and he eventually figures out like it's not getting us all together. It's I have to sacrifice, myself to fix this myself. So
right,
and that's where he's walking out on the platform and he's grabbing all the different branches and the whole thing is starting to turn green. Like he really just becomes like what saves the TVA, and the TVA shifts from pruning the timelines to simply just controlling the Kang variants and making sure like they're pruning them or making sure that they're in control.
right.
And that's what ultimately becomes of the TVA at the end of that season. Um, I do have a question just to kind of end this, John. Does Owen Wilson's nose get more and more fucked up as the season progresses? Because every time I see him and it goes a close up to his face, like I can't help but like, and I actually asked my wife this, and I was like, does his nose just look worse and worse as the season the show goes on?
I mean maybe, I mean it his nose has already been fucked up for god knows how long. I mean, maybe that's why he goes, "Wow," like when he gets,
Wow.
when he gets hit in the face. It's like, "Wow, you hit
And
me
I
hard."
actually looked this up, and he's broken his nose not once but twice as a youngster. So the first time was in high school when he got into a fight, and then the second time came when he was playing football with his friends.
You know, again, I'm not surprised that most actors have like imperfections, but I mean, especially older ones. Like at that point, you're just like, "What's the point? I'm not going to get a nose job. I'm just going to let my nose get crooked at that point."
No, and I mean, and it's completely fine. It just was kind of a funny question because, like, I'm watching the show, and every time it goes to his face, it's like is his nose even more crooked than it was in the last show, in the last episode? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe it's just me, but like when it goes up to his face, like I go right to the nose. I
That's a
can't help
weird
it, dude.
fact. I mean,
I can't help it. It's just there, and I'm like, I don't remember. Maybe it's because he's getting older, so it's moving.
I mean, maybe I don't know.
I don't know, but I never realized like I knew Owen Wilson's nose was always flat, but I
Yeah,
didn't
maybe it was
remember
younger,
it
but
being
yeah.
so like weirdly crooked, which is
I mean,
it's just weird to me.
but again, he's getting what was it? AARP kind of like you, Ben. I mean,
Wow,
wow. He's like, you really want to
wow,
go there? Wow.
wow.
Anyways, guys, we appreciate that you like to listen to us banter, especially like during this like Loki season 2 kind of review. But like, at the end of the day, we just appreciate everything you guys like to do. Support us in any way you can. Sharing that the podcast and even the merch store and all this other stuff because again, we don't have a big social group or circle like, you guys probably do because even our 50 or 60 listeners on Spotify. Come on now. You can if you share it with one friend, guess what? That's 120 people at the end of the day. And maybe those people would and like that's the whole point. You grow the podcast as a whole,
Right.
and then like
Our
again,
whole mission is to unite geeks, and we're all in the same culture. So,
again,
click that follow button, click the share button, share it out every once in a while.
you
Let
know,
let other people know that might be interested in what we're talking about. Have a chance to get entertained by a couple of dorks.
couple of dorks talking on a pod, or pod mics, or just in general, just kind of sitting here, shooting the shit. Really, that's kind of what we do. We just kind of shoot the shit, and kind of like
Maybe throw a fact or two out there, but
yeah. And Matt likes to just bore people, but that's fine. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding, guys. But like as always, until next time.
stay geeky.